Hello and welcome to another episode of The Naked Turner. I was so excited today. I was the lucky recipient of a piece of 1,000-year-old plus bog oak that had been buried in the Irish bog for the last 600 years, 400 plus year old tree with buried in the bog oak and preserved for all those years. It was sent to me by a very gracious man by the name of Alan Simpson, who took it upon himself to send me this piece and several other pieces of bog oak. I'm going to attempt to try to turn this into a small lidded canister, which I will then send back to Ireland for Mr. Alan Simpson. And Alan, I want to thank you very much today. When I received these pieces of bog oak, I was like a little kid at Christmas. So thank you very much. I appreciate it, and hopefully this will turn into something awesome that I can send over to you in Ireland. All right, you take care, and hopefully this goes well. Okay, I have this piece of bog oak, which you can see all of the old peat, it looks like, that might have settled in, the mud and peat that settled into this and oxidized this piece. It looks like it's got some beautiful tiger eyeing or tiger veining in it, and it has some checks down at this end, and that's why I have this end in my chuck, and this end will be the end that I'm going to try to get a small canister with a lid out of this. So hopefully I'm successful in making that happen, and I'm going to start by roughing this in with a roughing / detail gouge that I'll be using to round this into a cylinder. Now a cylinder, it has a small series of checks running all the way through this side, but this side looks, not only does it look beautiful, it looks very stable as well, and I think once this has a finish on it, it's going to be real pretty. I have one more flat spot up here which I'll turn down right now. Oh yeah. Yeah, I don't know if you can see that, but it's already developed a really nice sheen, and this wood is cutting extremely beautifully. I thought it was going to be a lot more, have a lot more tendency of wanting to split out, but I guess maybe since it's been, has so many minerals included in it from curing for so long under the peat bogs of Ireland that it is more stable, and that's awesome. So it's looking really nice, and I think I actually like the shape that I have right there. Now I just need to work on how I'm going to deal with the top and what kind of finial I'm going to make on it. Switching over to my Cindy Drozda finial tool, and I'm starting to shape the finial of this now, and I wish you guys could smell the smell. This has got a really wonderful oaky smell that reminds me of some good Irish whiskey. It's been well aged in oak barrels. So I'm just shaping off this finial for the top of this canister, and then I'll continue on. Okay, so since I took the tailstock off, which I'm just trying to take out a little bit now, because of the fact that I want my top to fit nice and roundly, so I need a circle out there, not any lips. Okay. Okay, so I've now made a groove about the depth that I want. Now I need to make a series of subsequent ones that are the same. I like to make the shape of this column inside, or that cylinder inside, which will be the tenon for my lid. I like to make that slightly tapered so that it's getting larger, and that way if I oversize my hole slightly, I have kind of a conical fit, almost like a Morse taper fits into your tailstock or headstock. So think of it as ever so slightly tapered, and that way if it doesn't fit exactly right, you can take and sand just a tiny little bit of your leading edge off, or take and part or use any tool to take a little bit of that shear, cut a little of that edge off, and you end up with a slightly tighter fit again. So keep that in mind as you're doing this. I leave a tiny little bit size of my tenon still left, and that shows me exactly the width of where I parted this at. And that way it gives you a nice easy spot to sneak up on without having to take any measurements. Alright, and now before I part that off, I'll sand all that and put a little finish on it. I have it sanded down now to 400 grit, and I'm going to be applying some of my finish. And this should really start looking pretty. Oh yeah, I love the contrast in this wood of the oxidized oak tiger veining and the flecking, and then this lighter side here. It's really pretty. Alan, this is a beautiful piece of bog oak, and it's really coming to life here as I put some finish on it. Alright, so I'm going to now be parting off the lid, and I'm going to make a small chamfer right here on this edge, just to help guide it in to the mortise that I'll make for that. And safety goggles are on. Okay, and there it is, a tiny little piece that I can just knock off and sand. Bog oak lid. And here's the lid with the bottom sanded off and some finish on it. Now I'll start hollowing the inside of the canister. So here's something I like to do, which I was just trying to describe. I left a tiny little shoulder here when I parted. I didn't part right up against my canister. I left a tiny little shoulder, and that shows me very close to where my lid ended up in sizing, so that it means I don't have to necessarily pull out a sizing tool until right near the end, or I can just start fitting it, because I know once I get real close to that ring, I can start sanding and then testing and fitting, and I'll get a nice tight suction fit on that. Alright, so I'm getting really close to the shoulder which I left on my tenon, and now what I'm doing is I'm leaving that tenon and going in about 1/4 of an inch or so further. Whoops, 1/4 of an inch or so further. Oh, I just got a catch. Let's see what happens. I want to check it. Well, that catch took me right to my shoulder and passed, unfortunately, so I may have to take some of that face off and get to a new section of the channel, but let me first check. It may not have taken off too much because, like I said, I leave these slightly tapered. Okay, so it's fitting, but let me check I'm going to sand it a hair and see what happens. I may have to get rid of a little bit of that edge there, which is fine. But I have a feeling once I sand this, it's going to be too loose. I shouldn't have been trying to talk while I was trying to do that. Yeah, see, it's too loose. So I'm just going to part off some more of this surface here and get back to, whoops, excuse me, part off a little bit more of the face of this and get back to some material that's tapered. That's why I taper the inside. Alright, so I'm going to part off some of this face, or gouge off. And that's probably enough. Clear away the burr. Alright, let's check that. Could be a little bit tighter, so we're just a hair more off, maybe like a 30-second or so, 60, probably a 30-second, maybe even a full 16th. Okay, and the way I'm doing that is low handle and turning the cutting edge and just pivoting across the face. Okay, there's about a 64. There's about a 30-second. Clearing that inside edge. And it's just a matter of fitting and refitting. Okay, that's really nice now. Once I sand that, that'll be a nice tight fit. And now you can see why I like to do a slight taper on both the lid as well as the hole. That way you can get it nice and jam fit. Okay? Alright, so a little more hollowing inside of there and smoothing and transitioning a little later. But yeah, I had seen this check. It runs all the way through here, but it looked pretty stable, although now that I have a top that's going in and it has a slight wedge to it, it's showing me that it does want to open up just a hair. So I'm going to glue that. So I have it glued very well with some wood glue, clamped up, and I need to put one more wrap of tape on it and get it nice and tight. Squeezing and pulling and clamping nice and tight. Alright, there we go. Okay, that was a shame because it was just about finished being shaped, and I was going to start working on getting rid of the bottom section when I noticed that the actual check had developed into more than just a check, but was actually a small split. And that's a thing that happens a lot with oak. It is very hard, but because it's so hard, it is also fairly brittle, and it can do that to you, especially along those little rift lines. So anyway, there it is. Okay, so I glued it. I let it set up for about an hour. I sanded out the inside, and I checked the fit on this, and it was a little tight, so I sanded it a little bit more, and now I have a nice snug fit, and I'm going to put some finish on it. There's still, you can still kind of feel the little checks, but they're pretty well under control at this point. I'm going to put finish on and see what it feels like. Okay, and it looks like that crack is trying to open back up. Ooh. Whoops. Oh, I just dropped my top. Hope I didn't do too much damage. Let's see. No, I didn't, luckily. It still looks good. Okay, let me just polish it off a little bit. Did get a little bit of dirt on it. Hit the ground there. Alright. There we go. Beautiful. Now all I have to do is part it off. And as I part it, I'll be cupping the bottom a little bit so it'll stand nice and flat. Alright, so I have it glued back up and taped and clamped. And now I'm just shaping this while it's drying on the inside. Shaping the bottom, which is cutting really nicely. Okay, so this is with no finish on this, right? On this cut right here, and you can see how it's achieved a very, very polished edge. And so I really won't have to do much sanding, just a little bit of burnishing on that. Alright, I'm getting ready to part this off, and we'll see if I can keep that base intact. Let me line up the grain here. There it is. A little bit off. There we go. Finished oak bog, or sorry, bog oak canister. And you know what I'm going to call this actually, since it's 1,000-year-old? I'm going to call it a time capsule. This is the bog oak time capsule. And there it is, finished piece. Hope you enjoyed the turning.